set spies on me from a darkened corner. Their lustful heartbeats clumsily give them away. They will give everything to me, their soul even. But what I desire is for those heartbeats to cease. My sounds are as intoxicating as me. Tell me if you've heard this one. You'll love this. Well, of course we won.
What's up, everyone? Let's get into another hero analysis. It looks like the Shadow Arc faction got another hero, and compared to Ari's, I'm excited for Daji. She's a mage-type hero who specializes in crowd control skills while providing buffs for herself and her team. Let's look first at her ultimate, Wheel. This is the first skill that has a charm ability which makes enemy heroes attack their allies and then get damaged for a percentage of their attack, as well as stunned. This is a great counter to high DPS melee heroes who come out front and center, such as Oda Nobunaga. The downside to her ultimate is that it has no use for bosses since they can't be controlled, and even if they could be charmed, there would be no team for them to attack. Okay, let's look at her regular skills. One thing to note is that she is one of the few heroes who have all three active skills, with the other heroes being Prometheus and Titania. Her first one is Wipe, which is her highest damaging skill since it targets only one enemy hero closest to her lowest HP ally hero. It's a little survival assistance by reducing the enemy hero's damage, as well as giving lifesteal to the lowest HP ally hero and herself. Next is Point, which deals less damage but targets two enemy heroes with the lowest HP. This is her way of helping the ally DPS hero with killing faster by reducing the two enemy heroes' health reception and increasing the ally DPS hero and her attack speed. Last is Sweep, which deals even less damage but targets three random enemy heroes. This skill isn't meant only for the ally DPS hero like Point is, but rather for whichever hero is about to use their ultimate, so as to deal as much damage as possible on the defense-reduced enemy heroes with the attack increased ally hero and Daji. Looking at her entire skill set, she's primed for regular PvE campaign fights and PvP, but not good for bosses since she does both crowd control and multi-target controlling. Alright, we're done with the skills. Let's briefly talk about her equipment. Since she has three active skills like Prometheus, her best setup, like him, is to use Yasakani Magatama with air runes. If you don't have Yasa for her, use either Excalibur so she can empower her team more, or Scarab Badge or Aegis Shield so she can stay alive longer to continue outputting crowd control. If you don't have air runes, at least try Dark or Forest runes so she can activate her ultimate as soon as possible, or Earth runes for more survival. Next, let's move on to her Divinity trees, which are higher quality than the average hero. Starting out at 2 nodes, all her tier 1 skills are superb. If you have Obsession as the first, you can't go wrong with Torment or Eterna. Personally, I prefer Eterna more often than Torment, but they're both great tier 1 skills. Eterna to me is more useful for bosses that get damage reduction over time, such as the War Dragons. But as I said before, she's not suited for boss fights. For 3 nodes, she does best with all 3 of those for PvE. For PvP, you want Obsession combined with Abyss, since that energy restoration denial skill is important for the first 6 seconds of a fight. At 4 nodes, you want to get Extraordinary on her ASAP because it's such a good team support skill. Combine that with Obsession and either of the other tier 1 skills for PvE. For PvP, consider using Extraordinary and Abyss. At 5 nodes for her PvE, you should use Extraordinary, Abyss for energy denial or formational trance for more skill accuracies, since she should be in the backline anyways, and any of her tier 1 skills. If you're forced to use her for a boss, you might consider switching formational trance for another tier 1 skills to have the 4 node setup to increase her damage output. For PvP, either use the 4 node setup with an added tier 1 skill or Extraordinary and Energy Field. Energy Field is great for keeping the team alive and supporting it since that's part of her role. Finally, at 6 nodes, you have 2 options for PvE. One of the tier 1 skills, Extraordinary and Energy Field, if you have a hero that tends to die fast like a glass cannon fighter, or give her Panacea to keep Daji alive longer. For PvP, I would recommend using the Energy Field option. If you find your Daji dying too fast and don't mind sacrificing team damage output, you could always pick both Energy Field and Panacea at the cost of losing Extraordinary. If you get the resources to awaken her Epic Antique and get her to 7 nodes, she has 2 recommended PvE setups from me. One is Formational Trance, Extraordinary, and Energy Field or Panacea. And the other is both Energy Field and Panacea with a tier 1 skill. For PvP, it would be the same, except you would replace Formational Trance with Abyss. And again, the 4 node setup would be ideal for a boss damage output kind of setup. Alright, now let's look at her iconic weapon setup. Her Chimera stat is critical defense, which is good for her survival. For iconic weapon 2 node color, I would recommend purple if you're using her to support backline DPS heroes, or green if you need to keep her alive as long as possible for her crowd control capabilities. I'm staying away from yellow because she's not always guaranteed to use her skills on the frontline heroes, as 2 of the skills have conditional targeting and 1 is randomly selected. For the node attributes, I recommend going for a more defensive setup. Since she's not in the team for direct DPS purposes, I would specifically recommend Insight, since it will improve the 6-second duration for each of her skills. However, it won't affect her ultimate's charm duration, as it says in the last part of the skill description. On her iconic weapon, let's look at her iconic weapon skills, which are pretty simple in explanation. All the way to 500 deals with improving her ultimate by making the charmed enemy heroes hit their allies harder and lose energy after it's done, which delays their ultimate, since they can't use it during the charm, but they'll still build up energy. Her 600 skill is great, but it's not the top tier, it's not spectacular. She's going to receive some percentage of lifesteal, attack speed, and attack increase whenever she uses one of her regular skills. Now let's go over her performance in all game aspects. We already mentioned she's not good for bosses, but she performs fine in non-boss PvE fights. For Crusada Veta, her main divinity is Devoid. She joins heroes such as Prometheus and Nephthys. However, she wouldn't be much good for Jormungandr or the other bosses. Now, for PvP, I think she has the chance to shine there. She has full crowd control skill set with buffs and self buffs attached to each one. Additionally, her charm ultimate is the first of its skill effect, so we'll see how much of an impact it makes in a PvP setting within the future. So to summarize, Daji is great for crowd control and has excellent divinity sets for what fits your playstyle. She's not good for single target fights, just like bosses, and she doesn't output as much DPS as her fellow Shadow Arc mages because she's more focused on team support through crowd control and buffs. In the future, I will be putting out a patch 1.26 tier list video to include her. I've already uploaded her frame picture into my personal tier maker if you're coming up with teams to include her. I will not be putting out a patch 1.26 top meta teams video at this time because I don't believe Daji will be within those 3 teams. Thanks for listening to my analysis on Daji. See you later.